Today we have gathered here to celebrate the birthday of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and since the moment of his death upon the cross, Mary is also mother of each one of us. And how lovely it is that today we should gather and celebrate the birthday of Mary in such a large gathering. Year after year, I have been celebrating this feast, of course, but it's the first time that I've seen a special birthday cake for our Blessed Lady. So I'm delighted to have an opportunity to meet with you today, to be with you today as part of this celebration. As has been mentioned, I'm a member of the Vincentian community. That is the group begun by Vincent de Paul. And we are associated very directly with the Daughters of Charity of Vincent de Paul. And it was to one of them, St. Catherine Labouré, in 1830, that Mary appeared and revealed what has become known to us as the miraculous medal. And that is a very central part of our ministry, inviting people, encouraging people to entrust themselves to the care of Mary under the title of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal. During the apparitions of Mary to St. Catherine Labouré, a second image was given to her, apart from the image we are familiar with on the Miraculous Medal. And the second image is referred to as the Our Lady of the Globe. And it's an image of Mary standing, holding very lovingly, very tenderly, the globe in her hands, more gently than the smallest of babies. And she is holding all of humanity in that gentle grasp. Speaking to St. Catherine, Mary said to her, "Tell them not to be afraid. The protection of God shall be ever present to you in a special way. I shall be with you myself. Always I have my eye on you." What lovely words of reassurance for us today. I want to, if I were to give a title to these few words, I would call these few words "With Mary in Russia," because for the last number of years, 11 years, that's where I have been working as a priest. One of the most loved of all the Russian icons is the icon depicting Mary as the Mother of God of tenderness, the Mother of God of gentleness, the Mother of God of tenderness. Everybody loves this, and in many of the houses you will find this icon. It shows Mary cradling the child Jesus in her hand and pressing him cheek by cheek with herself. Very, very tender, motherly gesture of care and love and protection. And it seems to me that this is one of the most beautiful gifts of the Virgin Mary to those who reverence her and have devotion to her, the gift of gentleness, of tenderness, one towards another. I'm going to tell just a few stories of how things which we put very specifically into the hands of Mary transpired for us during these last 11 years. Mostly when you speak of Russia, and more especially of Siberia, people immediately imagine a miserable, cold, empty, hostile place. A place that's only about trying to survive. It's true, the climate is hard, but I don't suppose it's any colder or more hard than, let's say, parts of Canada or Alaska. But of course, it's not just the climate that has been harsh in Siberia and in Russia, because life there was extraordinarily harsh during the 70 years of communist rule. Life was, in fact, brutally hard, and the individual or the individual family counted for nothing. It was only about the collective. If the individual could not keep up, could not meet the demands that were being made of them, too bad. There was no such thing as tenderness or gentleness there. It seems to me that gentleness has been a great mark of the way in which Mary, and indeed her divine Son, have dealt with people. Gentleness, not by force, not by violence, not by fear. Sheryshevo is a little town not very, very far from the present border with Poland. Not very far. It's a town of about 10,000 people, so it's really a village. There was a large Jewish community in Sheryshevo, and they were living amicably and at peace with the Orthodox population and with the Catholic population of that town. It became a part of the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic. And then in 1941, it was overrun by Hitler's forces invading the Soviet Union. It was, of course, decimated. The Jewish community was ended. And they were under the rule of the fascist occupiers until 1945, when they were liberated by the Red Army. And since then, they've been under the rule of the communist regime. Of course, during that time, religion was prescribed. Officially, there was religious freedom, but in practice, it was prescribed. The church in Sheryshevo, dating from 1843, was closed in 1953. Closed finally. There was to be no more religion. The church, a fine building, was given over to the collective farm, and it was to serve as a storehouse and a repair shop for the tractors in the communal farm. Those who were enforcing the ban on religion had not reckoned with the faith of the people in Sheryshevo, mainly women, because most of the men were assigned to different places to work. But the women came Sunday after Sunday, and they prayed outside the door of their church, which of course was closed. Sometimes they were ignored, sometimes they were jeered at, occasionally they were beaten and driven away. But they persisted, winter and summer. And I can tell you the winters are very severe there. They had no reason to believe other than their faith and their trust in the promises of Mary. They had no other reason to believe that someday their church would be reopened and they would once again be able to worship in spirit and in truth. Not far from the village, in the forest, there still remains the huge big underground silo built for the nuclear weapons. The weapons have all been removed, but the big empty silo is still there, huge, 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 many times bigger than this church, underground. And the weapons that were housed there, I'm told, were actually aimed at London. They had different silos targeting the different cities of Western Europe, and the ones in Sheryshevo were destined for London. I remember in August of 1993 going into that little church, for one of the very first masses in Sarajevo since the time of communism. And I will never forget the extraordinary faith of the people. It was still like a storehouse. There were no seats. There were bags of fertilizer and cement and various things around the place. We had a little temporary table as an altar. But my goodness, the faith of that community when we prayed and offered the Eucharist for the first time in more than 40 years. Similar things can be told of town after town, city after city. Not far from Sarajevo is a much bigger town, Procession. And there in the center of the town is a huge, beautiful church, originally built by Polish believers to Our Lady assumed into heaven. Of course, it too was closed. It was officially turned into what they called a dom culturi. That means like a theater or a place of culture. The communists built a floor halfway up, and the downstairs remained like a theater, and upstairs they had meeting rooms and so on. There was a young priest in the parish that time when it was closed. His name was Father Casimir. He was arrested. He was taken across the street to the head of the KGB. He was tortured there. He was imprisoned, and he was sent to Siberia. Little by little, after the fall of communism, things changed. And by 1993, the Catholics were allowed to have Mass once again in that church, but just in the downstairs part. Upstairs were still the offices of the Communist Party. But they were very determined people, and they demanded and ultimately were given back the right to the whole church building. And straight away they decided to remove all the structures that had been built inside and restore the church as it originally had been. There was no question of calling in a building firm. Many of the workers who came in, they were the church members. They worked for nothing. Many of them were elderly women. And little by little, they pulled down everything that had been rebuilt and restored the church. It took them 7 years to do. And then I can remember being there on the feast of the Assumption of Our Blessed Lady, the 15th of August, 1998. Everything was beautifully and decorated. Throngs of people were there, flags and bunting, and everybody was waiting for the Cardinal to come. He was coming to rededicate the church. And you know who was the Cardinal? Cardinal Casimir. The Cardinal was that little priest who had been arrested in 1953, who had been sent to Siberia. His church had been closed. And now he comes back as Cardinal to reconsecrate the church where he had served as a newly ordained priest. All of these extraordinary changes taking place gently. No violence. Gently. Just as like the snow melting even in Siberia beneath the summer sun. Just consider the way in which the Soviet Union itself came to an end. For years we had lived in the fear of nuclear war. And the Soviets and the Americans built up massive, grotesque quantities of nuclear weapons to destroy one another and all the rest of us included. And yet only 3 people died. One of them accidentally, in the final ending of the Soviet Union. The extraordinary changes that are wrought gently by the power of God, as gently as we see the seasons changing from summer to winter. I can go on with other stories from other places, but each time the effect is the same. In Nizhny Tagil, This is far over in Asian Russia. It's until the end of communism a city that was closed. Nobody allowed in, nobody allowed out. It didn't appear on the maps. It was the biggest single tank building center on the planet. A vast place where everything was geared to the building of tanks. And thousands upon thousands of tanks, they're still built there, but in much smaller numbers today. Our priests went there in 98 or so. There was very little prospect of anything much happening. But with help from Germany, they decided to build a little church. It was actually a prefab church, which is not ideal for the climate there. The church was dedicated to Our Lady of Fatima. When we were making the foundations, the miraculous medal was placed in the foundations. And the church was completed without objection. Eventually it was made more or less warm inside. But there still was very, very little chance of any new life. But once again, very gently, imperceptibly, the changes came, and I attribute them so much to the gentle working of Mary, the Mother of Tenderness. There now is a fine parish community there. There are sisters there, and a great deal of love and care for the prisoners, for the people in the TB hospital, and so on, is now taking place from that parish center. Mary, in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, very, very much the mother of tenderness, the mother of gentleness. Everything there had been done on the basis of violence, of force, and now this extraordinary change was coming about, and gentleness was taking the place of violence and of force. We are celebrating today Mary, our mother, the birthday of Mary, Mother of the Church, and our mother. Let the presence of Mary in your lives also be the presence of gentleness. She is the mother of gentleness. We need gentleness. We live in a society that at times can be very rough, can be abrupt, can be rude, can be harsh. People fight, people disagree. I think each of our families very much needs a mother of gentleness, a mother of tenderness. So today, on her birthday, let's invite her to come to each one as mother of tenderness, to come to each home as a mother of gentleness, so that we may live our lives by the way God would have us live them, rather than by our own initiative, our own doing. We learn instead to follow the motherly care of Mary, and so find ourselves united with her divine Son.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.